Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is Dr. Tom Iseley, who's with Purdue. Uh, Dr. Tom Iseley, thanks you for joining me. This is a pleasure. I've always wanted to, understand more about you and the history of how you got into BAMMY. I know you're in BAMMY right now, and you're working in Purdue. But what is your history like? How did you get into trenchless rehab and all this stuff you're doing for the industry?
Well, that's a good question. And actually, I had no choice but to get into the industry because my father and my grandfather were water and sewer pipeline contractors.
Nice.
So at an early age, I was following them around on the banks of the ditches and watching the work being done. And at the age of 12, I had no choice but to actually quit walking around and looking and actually go to work. So I started working with my father and grandfather when I was 12, and what we were doing then with my father was actually building brick manholes that are being rehabilitated today. So,
Wow.
but so my father had subcontracted the manholes off of a project down in Alabama. So my brother and I spent that summer working with him and mixing the mortar and throwing the bricks into the holes at my father as he built a. So from then on, it was like every summer and holidays and working in some aspect of water and wastewater pipeline construction.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
like I say, I had no choice but to get in it, but never got out of it after that. I did a lot of things that related to it. Have had a tremendous opportunity to work in just about every aspect of the water and wastewater, stormwater industry, from the construction, from the design to academic research and working actually with the city of Atlanta there. So
Okay.
that's how it all got started, and I had an opportunity to, after my first year in college. I'm originally from North Carolina, so we
Yeah.
were working primarily in the Carolinas, but we did go down for a few years and work in Alabama on projects with my father and grandfather. But went to 1 year in college in Gastonia, North Carolina, Gaston Tech, and after that worked with an engineering company in North Carolina. Then my father had moved down back to Alabama, and so I joined him in working one semester, first semester of my sophomore year, laying pipe with him. And actually, the project was in Carsville, Georgia. But after that, I had an opportunity at the age of 19 to go to work for an engineering company in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
And so I was started out as a junior draftsman and continued to stay with them and work my way through the University of Alabama in Birmingham in civil engineering. And during
Nice.
that time, that was actually got into the Vietnam War period, and so I had the opportunity to spend 4 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. And
Wow.
during that 4 years, I had an opportunity to go down on an icebreaker as an electrician on the helicopters and work in the Antarctic and then in the Arctic region. So after I finished up that 4 years, I went back to the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the same engineering company and finished up my degree and stayed and got a degree in MBA there at the University of Alabama. Continued to work for the engineering company. Eventually moved from being junior draftsman to being a project engineer and project manager. And in 1977, moved over to another company and became vice president of engineering for them, and primarily focusing on design of water and wastewater treatment plants, but also doing a lot of work on pipelines.
Okay.
That was the time when Public Law uh, uh, 90, uh, 92-500, was passed, the Clean Water Act,
Okay.
and so a lot of focus at that time was on doing sewer system evaluation surveys.
Mm.
So about 80% of our business at that time in this engineering company had to do with the inspection of sewer systems and developing the reports and recommendations on how to rehabilitate the systems. So
Wow. You were a pioneer back then.
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago. So,
Yeah, I mean,
but,
look.
but, but I had an opportunity to actually, after I was vice president of engineering, my father was actually vice president of Thompson Pump up in North Carolina, and we got together and started a utility construction company,
Okay.
and had an opportunity to work together again. And we worked together until 1982. In 1982, the economy had was, had some real problems, and so we couldn't really
Yeah.
support both of us. So he went back to North Carolina, and I had an opportunity to join the faculty at Mississippi State University.
Okay.
Yeah, civil engineering. They were looking for somebody with a master's degree, construction experience, and to come into the civil engineering department and teach construction courses. So that's how 1982 was when I got into academia and worked there. Worked at Mississippi State for 4 years, and actually during that 4 years, still maintained construction activity. And the
Okay.
economy got better during that 4 years, and so the construction activity grew. I'm still teaching and doing the construction like two major jobs.
Yeah.
1986, I had an opportunity to make a decision. Do I want to stay in the construction or devote more time to the academic part of my life? So I wrote one letter to an engineering PhD program, and that happened to be Purdue. And
Nice.
they called me after I sent that letter in and said, "Wow, you got kind of interesting background with your design experience, construction experience, and teaching experience." And so they offered me an opportunity to come to Purdue, pursue my PhD, and also teach while out during that time. So that's and actually, Chad, that was when, even though I had, it's kind of interesting, even though I had had all that experience with water and sewer and storm sewer pipeline
Yeah.
construction and design and evaluation through the program with EPA, uh, and actually was still actively involved in the construction industry.
Yeah.
But when I went to Purdue, I had an opportunity to do a research project with a Indiana Department of Transportation.
Okay.
And it had to do with looking at ways of putting pipelines on the roadways without digging ditches. And I said,
Ah.
"Wow, this is going to be an easy project
Ah.
because I owned an auger boring machine and a slurry boring machine at that time." So I said,
Really? Wow.
and
What are
had
the odds?
projects where I had subbed out work to utility tunneling. So I said, "This is an area I know something about." But
Yeah.
the important point is, uh, I was surprised, because I started this work in 1986 with NDOT,
Yeah.
and again I started doing the literature search, which led me into looking at what's going on around the world in what
Yeah.
we now call no dig or trenches technology.
Yeah.
And I was amazed. I didn't, coming out of the industry with that kind of background that I had, I was amazed at what was going on around the world. But what happened was, as a result of working in the transportation industry for Transportation Institute, uh,
Yeah.
I began to see the benefit of industry and academia and government working together.
Yeah.
And but I said this would be great if we had something like that that focused on underground infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find anything. So when I finished up the program at Purdue,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I talked to a number of universities, but Louisiana Tech was the only one that really, I think, that really could relate to what I wanted to spend my time doing. I was a little bit
Yeah.
older than most PhD students coming out of university, so I had already had a focus that had an area that I wanted to focus on. So the Louisiana Tech, I went there in '88, and we started the center. I went there with the concept of establishing some sort of a industry university cooperative research center, which became the Trenches Technology Center.
Okay.
And we started that in '80. Went there in '88. We started in '89. Really got funding toward the end of '89 and '90, and then '91 got a real pretty good sized research project with the Corps of Engineers. So that kind of kicked off the research part of the Trenches Technology part of my life. But,
Wow. That's a history there.
yeah,
Wow.
but
I
uh,
Go
after
ahead.
starting the center there, I stayed there 5.5 years, and I was I was a professor and also director of the center, and the center kept growing and growing.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity to go back to the Purdue system in Indianapolis and become head of the construction
Oh,
engineering
wow.
and management technology program. And so I did that. But actually, what was happening is after spending a number of years with the Trenches Technology Center, looking at what we can do to expand and grow and increase the awareness of doing things underground that we never have been able to do before. That was very exciting to work on technical solutions. But
Hmm.
Ted, I began to realize that you can have the best technical solutions in the world, but if you don't really understand the nature of the problem, you may not be selecting the right solution for that
Ah,
particular application.
yeah.
I had an opportunity to join a research team over in Japan, and that team was developing. They had gotten a grant from the Tokyo Metropolitan Sewer Authority to develop a new way of inspecting pipe,
Hmm.
utilizing a side scan and some other instrumentation. So I had an opportunity to join them in the early stages of developing that technology, and then had an opportunity to do a startup company with them to commercialize that technology in the United States. And
Right.
so I was only at Purdue's campus in Indianapolis for like 4 years.
Okay.
And then I got out of academia for 9 years. And during that 9 years, Chad, I had an opportunity to do the startup for this technology for this Japanese company. And then I had an opportunity to join the program in Atlanta. Shirley Franklin had become mayor. She had inherited the $4 billion consent decree,
Hmm.
and uh, and she had appointed a chairman, Jack Ravan, to be the chairman. I mean, to be the commissioner of the Department of Watershed Management, which was drinking water and sanitary sewer, storm sewer, the whole bit. I had an opportunity to become a senior advisor to him in January 2003.
Mm.
And what happened, and what was driving this was the mayor's vision and her passion for water. And her vision was, even though she had inherited a $4 billion consent decree, largest in the country by
Wow.
far, uh, her vision was still to move the water program from where it was. Some people say worst in class, to meeting that $4 billion consent decree, which is basically meeting minimum standards, to being first in class.
Mm.
So I had an opportunity to join the commissioner because he was
That's
saying,
great.
how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to meet her vision? Because she was
Right.
really vocal about, about what her passion was. And so working together, beginning in 2003, we began to realize that you can have the best technical solutions in the world.
Yeah.
You can have the best information on the problems, condition assessment. But if you don't have that tied into some type of comprehensive risk-based asset management program, you're still probably not making the right decisions at the right place at the right time.
Right.
So that was a little over 20 years ago, and so I spent the last 20 years spending a lot of my time focusing on asset management because I had worked closely with a guy by the name of Steve Albee, who was with EPA and kind of the champion of
Yeah.
asset management for EPA. And he had a real passion for it, really understood that the importance of asset management. So I had an opportunity to work with him in the time that I was at Atlanta. And we ended up this organization that we started inside the city. Kind of interesting. It actually, started as a result of trying to meet the needs of a
Yeah.
major utility. But there
Yeah.
was so much interest from other universities that we brought in and internationally that we moved it out of the city and formed a nonprofit organization in 2004.
Okay.
2006, we got a grant from EPA, two-year research grant to look at what utilities across the country, and there's about 75,000 water utilities across the country. what could be done to try to help them understand the importance of developing and implementing programs utilizing best business practices. And
Yeah.
so we did that. We did that program, and uh, and uh, and then after we turned in the report to EPA, working with the volunteers in this organization called the Barrett Asset Management Institute,
Okay.
BAMMY, uh, we started developing online courses, and the first one was was uh, was marketed in 2010, 2 years after we completed the thing. So again, nobody was required to take the course. So we put it out. We worked through Benjamin Media,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, people started taking it. And as it stands today, we have people from 16 countries that have participated in these courses. They're called CTAM, Certification of Training and Asset Management. And
CTAM.
now we have 4 online courses, and the first one has to do with the introduction.
Okay.
The second one has to do with developing a plan, how to develop an asset management plan. The third one gets into how to implement the plan, and the fourth one gets into the finances. So we've had really subject matter experts from across the country and some international experts that's come together to put together courses that are developed by the industry, by professionals in the industry for the industry. So they're
Hmm.
very, very, very applicable to what large and small utilities struggle with every day in trying to figure out how to move forward with
That's
best
for
best
sure.
business practices.
Yeah.
So
That.
so what happened was after I had had done the startup, and then then that company decided they wanted me to move into a consultant and help them with their own management. That so I moved into working with a city, and then a large company, Sekisui Chemical, wanted to bring their spiral wound system into the country. So I helped them establish a base in Atlanta, and then had an opportunity to move back into academia. So I stayed out of academia for 9 years, but during that 9 years, I was still working with a number of universities.
Yeah.
I went back to the Purdue's campus in Indianapolis as the same head of the construction program,
Yeah.
and was there for 7 years and still keeping the stuff going with BAMMY.
Yeah.
And then what happened is the guy that hired me at Louisiana Tech in 1988 and helped me start the center. His name is Dr. Les Geis. He became president of the university, so he's president of Louisiana Tech now. But in 2014, I had an opportunity to go back and kind of take a look at the center, the Trenchless Technology Center, and
Yep.
where it was headed, and some ideas on some modifications. So I was invited to come back as a professor in civil engineering and
Uh-huh.
also director of the center. And so I did that in 2014. And then we brought in a younger guy who had actually gotten all his degrees at Louisiana Tech and had worked with the Trench Technology Center. John Matthews brought him in as the
John Matthew.
director.
Yeah.
You probably know him,
I've heard of him. Yeah.
and I'm sure some of your listeners know him well. But John was always impressed with with what he had done, what he was
Yeah.
doing. So we had an opportunity. Actually, it's kind of interesting. When I talked to the president about bringing somebody in that I could work with, he said, "Well, who would you recommend?" I said, "Well, the first person on the list would be John Matthews." So I didn't
Okay.
know whether John would be interested or not. But lo and
Just threw it
behold,
out there.
he was. And the interesting thing, he and his wife both are from that area, from that northern Louisiana area. So
Yeah.
it was just a natural, good fit. Both of them PhDs, and both of them came back to Louisiana Tech. So it was a good fit for them, good fit for the Trenches Technology Center. And I stayed there. That he came in March of 2017, and I actually retired from the academic part in 2019,
Okay.
but continued to work with him as director of international operations. We had done a lot of work in China. I
Okay.
had 5 major contracts with different organizations in China, so I became the director of international operations. And but the in the spring of 2020, COVID going on and all of that,
Yeah.
Purdue decided they wanted to open up a position that had to do with underground construction. So I had an opportunity to move back to Purdue in the summer of two, 2020,
Okay.
and as a professor of practice, but and my position is funded in part by an organization called the Beavers. And the Beavers is a large organization that started back in the 50s. And it
Okay.
was started by contractors, and it's run by the biggest contractors in the country, some of the biggest in the world.
Okay.
And they have, and what they do is they're really a charitable trust type organization, a charitable foundation. And what they do is they really come together to promote the heavy civil underground construction industry.
Okay.
And they do that by offering scholarships and funding positions like mine. There's like 18 universities that they've picked out where they uh, provide funding for
Okay.
positions. So that's what I'm a kind of a Beavers distinguished chair
Yeah.
here at Purdue. And we've done a lot of good things in the past 3 years. Exciting things have happened here. We started really focusing again on underground heavy civil.
Uh-huh.
So we started putting together a underground infrastructure team, and I've got a
Okay.
team of people that work with me every day. And you talked with Wei Lau. She came in. Actually, she transferred here with me from Purdue. She was a visiting scholar, but she
Okay.
came here and has been moved into a staff position. She's an employee of Purdue as a lead research engineer, and she works with me a lot on the BAMMY initiatives.
Okay.
And she's just done an amazing job in the last 3 years since she's come back with me here. And so she's moved into a position with BAMMY as the executive director.
Okay.
And she's put together, she's really transformed the organization.
Yeah.
Before we really focused on those educational programs, the
Yeah.
online courses and some specialty schools and things like that. But she's really transformed the organization into a resource for the industry to provide a lot of uh, a lot
Yeah.
of support. So she's established 7 committees that focus on asset management. She's put together a list of 10 liaison international ambassadors. She's got people picked out in the countries that that can that link us to
Yeah.
things in that country, and so she's got 10 of those in place. She started a journal, and now her big challenge is a Congress Congress that we're putting together in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a major milestone for the industry because I look at it like this: whether you're an individual or an organization or a company of some sort, at some points along the way, you need to stop and look back and make sure you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing for the industry with this Congress. It's not meant to be a technical conference. There's plenty of those around. As a matter of fact, this takes place a couple of days before WEFTEC. So if anybody's interested in technical solutions, then WEFTEC's a good place to go.
It
But
is.
this Congress, what Way has done is she's bringing together subject matter experts, people that's been in the asset management industry for a long time,
Mm.
diff- different aspects. So this Congress is going to be focusing on every core component of asset management, not just inspecting pipes and fixing pipe, but how to make the
Yeah.
work. So we're bringing in people like George Hawkins. He was the CEO of DC Water. When he took it over, he saw that there were many changes that needed to be made, and so he'll be talking about his journey
Yeah.
and moving that organization to being a real leader in asset management. And we're bringing in people from New Zealand and Australia. Australia 20 years ago were really setting the pace for asset management. So we're going to be bringing them in, and so the idea here is to really do 3 things with this Congress. It's going to start on September the 28th, the afternoon with a reception, all day on Friday. Saturday morning we'll do a panel. What we plan to accomplish is one is really establish what the state of practice is, not just in a region, but worldwide.
Hmm.
This is an international global event because we want to learn from each other.
We do.
When Steve Albee with EPA, he actually did the gap analysis, back in the mid '90s to determine, the investment gap that was
Yeah.
needed. That was one of the first times that had been looked at, and that's what drove Steve into saying, we really need to work with the utilities to make sure that they understand best business practices.
Yeah.
He traveled the world, really liked what was going on in New Zealand and Australia, came back and started revolutionizing the industry.
Yeah.
So now after that, so that whole initiative started as an international perspective.
Yeah.
So now after 20 years, we're gonna stop and take a look back from an international perspective and see what can we learn from each other. What's going on in other countries that we can utilize.
Yeah.
And then so we're going to look at the state of practice, try to document that. We're going to be looking at where we need to be in 2030, year 2030, and then and then the third thing is how do we get there? What
Yeah.
are we going to do? What kind of changes need to be made? So that's the Congress, and I hope that you
And
and
that's
your
in Tinley Park, right,
yeah,
Tom?
Tinley Park.
Okay. Tinley
Yeah,
Park, Illinois.
there's a lot. We have a lot of information on it. If anybody hasn't received it, they can contact you or contact
We're
me. And
we're yeah, we're gonna get to that at the end. But I do have a couple questions for you.
all right,
I want to learn a little bit more about your family.
all right,
Your father, grandfather, back then, and then it's amazing just to kind of review everything you told me. Is you're a jack of all trades. You have an entrepreneur, you have an academia, you have all these skill sets that basically makes you, a very valuable person in the industry. So thank you for doing everything you're doing, first of all. Um, and then, yeah, what's your father, grandfather? You
yeah,
started working with your dad again back in 1982. Uh, you know, can you get a little bit more? Your family now, like where's everyone located? That kind of stuff. They're not
yeah.
located personally, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, my grandfather and father have passed away, but like I mentioned, we're from North Carolina, Burlington, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So my father grew up working for working with his father
Uh-huh.
in the pipeline, water and sewer pipeline industry, and they worked all over the Carolinas and on into Tennessee. So he grew up with that. Then of course World War II came along,
Yeah.
and my grandfather then started working for the city of Wilmington, North Carolina, which is right on the coast of North
Yeah.
Carolina. So when my father got out of the Navy, my brother and I were both born while he was in the Navy. Then we moved, and he started working with working with his father in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina. And then they left the city and started working together. So they put together crews, and they're just a small entity. But what they would do is they had the ability with the crews and small tools and so forth to work for different contractors. They
Yeah.
started getting jobs. After World War II, a lot of money was being spent on. So we moved away. So our lifestyle was like gypsies. We moved around with the crew every
Yeah.
3 or 4 months from one town to the other to put in these systems,
Wow.
and so that's kind of how it was. We went to my brother and I went to a lot of schools. When my sisters came along, things started settling down a little bit,
Okay.
we didn't move around as much. But as
That's
time went on, my grandfather passed away, and then my father he started up a business several times and did how it's the cycle.
oh yeah, the roller
And then
coaster.
when I was in college, then he started working with. He's always really good with wet work,
Uh-huh.
dewatering, well points, and things like that. So he had an opportunity to work with to be vice president of the Mid Atlantic region for Thompson Pump, and I think
Okay.
they've been bought out by United Rentals, I think now. But
It looks
anyway, that's what he was doing when I became vice president of engineering, and we started working together again. But
wow. And
yeah,
your family
he's
is all
passed.
now. I'm sorry, I
Huh?
didn't mean to cut you off. Your family all now is in Indiana, or is it you have? Is it
Well,
you? And
my brother didn't follow up in the water and sewer business. He became a minister and
okay.
got his a doctorate in theology. And actually, he's located in Naperville
Oh, right near
and
me.
working with a church in Joliet. So he's
Okay.
so my my father actually when we were young, he became a Christian and actually went through a Bible college. A lot of stuff done at night, but so he had two parts of his life. One was ministry, and then the other he had to support his family through water and sewer work.
Right.
I like to say, my brother took off one to one side. I
It
took
seems that way. Yes.
to the dark side,
Exactly.
the
The
sewer,
dark side,
the
the
sewer
sewer
side.
side.
It's been good. So
That's awesome.
my sisters are still in Burlington, North Carolina,
Okay.
and some of their children have worked with me when I had the company that I started up a couple of times. So we still.
Yeah.
My oldest son has passed away, but my youngest son is has a plumbing business down in Florida. So
Okay.
still in the pipe work. So
He followed he followed you, your
yeah,
footsteps. You know, he's in the
some
sewers.
extent. He worked with me. Both of my boys worked hard with me when I was at the utility construction company. So.
Yeah, I bet. I bet you're a go getter, Tom.
Just
You're. It's amazing to just have this conversation with you and hearing how your history and learning more about you and your past. Right. This is amazing history. Um,
I think one of the most satisfying parts is really the impact that I've had on students.
yeah.
I've been in number of them are involved in the industry. Last night at 8 o'clock, I was talking to one. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in China, but he got his PhD under me at Louisiana Tech, and now he works for Quake Wrap, and
Yeah.
he's opening up the market for Quake Wrap in China. So I was in China just a month ago, and I had an opportunity to visit with him and make a presentation at the university over there, and meet with the municipal leaders of Nanyang. And this is something that's going to be announced at the Congress. Is Nanyang is a city in China that it's a central part of China that has
Yeah.
12.5 million people, and we're in the process of establishing a what we call a international trenches technology industrial park. And
Oh wow.
part of that's going to, this will be the first time that we've established a BAMMY branch, that it'll be part of this industrial park. And so one of the things that'll be announced at the Congress is the establishment of what we call a living lab in the central part of China in
Okay.
this town of 12.5 million. And actually, that's just in the city. It's about 40 million in the metropolitan area. So it's a big part of China.
Yeah.
But we're going to, but the idea of this living lab is we're going to be able to work with companies that want to develop technology or expand technology, but do real in place long term validation. In
Hmm.
other words, put it in place, have sensors and monitoring systems so that we can really look at how it performs over time.
Yeah.
And and the reason that's so important is when we start looking at doing these asset management plans,
Right.
a big part of it is looking at the next 20 years, you know, and
Right.
in the next 20 years, we've got to look at how that infrastructure is going to deteriorate. And if we renew it, does it really perform like we planned we
Right.
thought it was?
Exactly. Right.
So there's a real need to do some long-term
There is.
validation of various systems
And I think
and do
that's
it
a
in
yeah, sorry, Tom. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I think that's exactly what this industry needs, 100%. Because I think over the past several decades in our industry and here in America with underground trenchless and things, application is key, right? If we don't install it correctly, and that's one thing I've experienced in
right.
rehabilitation is if you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be applying materials,
Yeah,
100%. Because I've
yeah, you
seen
know,
the
yeah,
results of that kind of stuff when you don't have the right applicator, and installing the right products and doing it the right way. Um, it's been disastrous in some places where it just falls off
absolutely.
the wall,
I've
and
seen it
yeah,
too.
it's and that's one thing I'm passionate about. I'm like, okay, well, if we can fix that kind of stuff. Like you're talking about learning the long life cycle, the life cycle of the actual installation of the product and how long it's going to last, which it sounds like you guys are doing. That's huge for the industry, but also training is with BAMMY sounds like that's where we need to focus and get
Yeah,
people to,
yeah,
so that they can get properly educated on how to
yeah,
install these technologies correctly.
exactly.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so, so with BAMMY, we have the 4 online courses that anybody can take anytime. And then we have a 2 level certification program at associate level, professional level.
yeah,
And all of that came, we didn't just sit down and say, well, this is what we're going to do. Actually, it came as a result of the industry coming back and saying we need another course in how to develop a plan, how
yeah.
to implement the plan, how to finance the plan. And then when we got all that done, they said, well, we really need to establish a certification program similar to what they have in building construction, like the lead
There
system.
you go.
And
Yep.
so we put together a certification board that reports to our board of directors and developed that program.
That's super important. I think that if we can get these things aligned, like what you're doing in China as well as here in the United States, we start getting the contractors trained correctly, we can avoid the media,
Yeah,
the news media going,
yeah.
the stuff
You
that's been
know
going on. You know what I'm saying? Like
it.
that's the kind of stuff we do not want in the industry. I talked about that this week on talking about lead and water pipes, right?
uh,
We need to stay away from that publicity. Out of
yeah,
sight, out of mind is no longer anymore, because if we don't install these technologies, underground trenchless technologies correctly, we're going to be, uh,
yeah.
out there posted everywhere.
That's
So we
right.
want to avoid that kind of stuff.
That's
And
right.
what you're doing is fantastic, Tom. And I truly appreciate you joining me on the podcast. We ran out of
Well,
time. I have a bunch more questions, but
any time, Chad, I'll come back. I realize I get carried away sometimes and didn't
no,
give you
it's
a chance
great.
to ask you questions. But
It's
anytime you want me to come back, I'll be glad to.
awesome. Well, I look forward to it, and I definitely want to talk more about what you're doing in the future and training and tech. Just in China and all the stuff that you got going on, and just learn more about the industry with you. And yeah, it'd be great to reconnect later.
Looking forward
How
to it.
Tom? How can people get a hold of you? Would be the best ways.
Well, actually, the best way is just through email, and it's real simple. D as in David, Iseley at Purdue.edu.
That's pretty simple.
And yeah, D Iseley at Purdue.edu, or my phone number if you want to text or
No, don't
call.
put your phone number out there unless you want to.
No, the email is best.
Yeah, that'd probably be the best. So, well, thank you, Tom, so much for joining me, and truly appreciate your time here. And it's very great to learn more about you and your history, and
Thank
and,
you. Thank
and
you.
look forward to the
Thank you
next
for
time.
this opportunity.
You have a great
Okay.
weekend.
All right, you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.